104.5, the team, your home for New York Yankees baseball. Right now joining us, he was on the call for the Women's College Basketball Final Four. Also the play-by-play broadcaster for the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre New York Yankees AAA affiliate. John Sadak with us. John, take us through the final moments when Mississippi State hit that game winner over UConn.
Well, it was perhaps the most unexpected, most thrilling, monumental upset that all of college basketball has seen, but certainly within the confine of the women's game. And even though it was a 1-2 matchup in terms of seed, that was a significant underdog, a team that had lost by 60 to UConn the year before in the regional, and I saw that game at Bridgeport. It wasn't close. And 60 was the number that Vic Schaefer had hung on the inside of his locker room that he had up for the entire season as a reminder and inspiration for his team to snap the longest winning streak in college basketball history, just 1 year removed, granted against a very different UConn team, and its youth perhaps was exposed within the confine of that game. But anybody that said they saw that coming is lying.
I don't know if it's me being bitter that Albany played UConn as a 1-16 matchup, and we here in the Capital Region wanted to be the ones to pull off the upset. But was it good for women's college basketball overall for the streak to finally come to an end?
I decidedly think so. I think part of the majesty, the magic, the drama that we all love about the men's tournament, what has made that a national pop culture point of interest, is the notion that anybody can win. And while that has started to shift a little bit in the women's game, UConn was representative of, I think, what the national culture's thought was of women's basketball. The chalk largely holds. The favorites win, and they don't just win. It's uninteresting. It's blowouts. It's boring. And we had a thriller. Not only did they beat them, but they did it in overtime. It had all the recipe items that you would want from the great upset. It had a young, undersized hero who was soft-spoken and humble and playing for the tragic death of a family member. And it was Hollywood.
Why couldn't the Bulldogs hold off South Carolina in the national championship game?
I think they were out of gas. I also think South Carolina matches up pretty well with them. I mean, they've beaten them twice during the season. You can argue Mississippi State probably played better in Columbia, lost by only 3, missed 4 shots in the last 30 seconds of the game, didn't get some breaks along the way. But South Carolina was decidedly the better team in the SEC championship game, and both teams had to deal with learning more about themselves and redefining and expanding roles pretty late in the season. In the NCAA tournament, Mississippi State changed 4 of its 5 starters in the first couple of rounds, trying to find more offense that they knew they would need to beat a team like UConn. While that worked then, I think this was a tired team. They had played back-to-back 1 seeds, both in overtime, and now they're facing another juggernaut team. South Carolina's really good, and they were led by the most outstanding player in the tournament, Asia Wilson, who was the consensus #1 recruit in the country when she decided to stay in her home state. So I think a combination of South Carolina probably was purely better, and I do think Mississippi State was gassed.
John Sadak with us right now, 104.5 the team. Now, John, we're going to take off the women's hoop hat, put on the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre hat as we talk about the New York Yankees. Which players are you most intrigued to see this year as a lot of your guys are going to be in the big league this year?
Well, Clint Frazier, who was with us after the trade, he only had 5 games of AAA time before the Indians dealt into the Yankees, and they didn't go great. His start with the Yankees was not what he would want. Strikeouts were a little high, a lot of high-effort swings. He got hurt, again, in a high-effort situation, trying to run first to third, tweaked the hamstring. Came back and played pretty well down the stretch, but a very small sample size. And the young man has a lot of pressure on him. Brian Cashman comes out and says that he has legendary bat speed right after the trade. And you guys all know how New York City media will start to gobble that up, and the social media interest continues to pile on. I think he's a really good person and an outstanding talent, and a chance for him to come into the season already in the organization, knows a lot of these guys, has spring training, and can just play a little more carefree and loose. I'm curious to see what he brings to the table with his abilities. I'm also very curious to see how Kyle Higashioka does, who I assume will wind up being our catcher. Kyle was with us for about a month, and Gary Sanchez broke his thumb receiving a pitch during the course of last year, and he had as dominant a month. What Gary did in the big leagues, which is monumental, and it's a different level. I'm not saying they're directly comparable. But Kyle Higashioka had a very similar month at AAA while Gary was hurt. The same kind of month that Gary would later have in the big leagues. I think Kyle is, in some ways, found money. They always loved his defense. They always loved the way he called the game. Pitchers loved throwing to him. His offense was the question. He was a career hitter in the 230. And last year, he had one of the best seasons of any position player in minor league baseball, let alone for somebody who's a catcher who maintains all those defensive elements. I think Kyle's another guy to really keep an eye out on. I like Austin Romine a lot. We had him for several years in Scranton. He had an outstanding year as the backup to the Yankees, but I think the Yankees have a ton of depth up the middle.
John Sadak with us right now. So, John, as you pay attention to every day and have a wealth of knowledge about the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Yankees, the guys like us that are watching the big league club, we're wondering who's going to be the pitcher that comes up from the minors and saves us. Are there arms that you've seen already that you think will be in the Bronx sooner than later?
To be in the Bronx, that's a little tough to say. I do think if we look at recent history for the Yankees and knowing just what the game of baseball is like, there will be players inevitably injured. There will be a 17-inning game where they're going to need extra arms. I mean, heck, even look at opening day. If Tanaka fails to get out of the third, and they have to use a ton of arms. Events like that will happen, so guys will get called up. And I think you'll see a little bit of a revolving door. Luis Cessa will be in the big leagues again at some point this year. Chad Green will be in the big leagues at some point this year. Jordan Montgomery, based on his spring and what he did at AAA last year, I have to think would be in the big leagues at some point. Now, who's going to get there and it's going to click? I don't know. But I do believe that at least one or two of those guys will do that this year. I'm a big believer in Luis Severino. It's really, to me, all about not over-efforting and the changeup being a true, legitimate third pitch with more velocity differential to the fastball. But I actually think their better depth is probably in the bullpen. I think the big league bullpen is already great, and there are a ton of big-time arms that they'll have coming up through the minor leagues. I'm not yet seeing Chance Adams. I know the Yankees are very high on him. It appears from published reports it looks like he's probably going to Double-A. We don't have our formal roster yet, so I can't confirm or deny that. But they were very high on what he did last year. He was the Yankees minor league pitcher of the year. And every scout that I speak to says he has the ultimate give me the ball kind of mentality. And he's a guy who was a reliever in college who has blossomed into an outstanding starter.
John, man, we appreciate you. And this year in particular with the Baby Bombers coming up and all that talent you've got, we really look forward to talking to you as the season progresses.
You got it, guys. Thanks for having me.